When I was growing up, I thought of tiramisu as like the most extravagant, most fancy, most bougie kind of dessert that I couldn't possibly make at home. But as I learned, like all other classic Italian dishes, tiramisu is actually very easy, it uses very few ingredients, and it's totally achievable at home. So in this video, let's make some tiramisu. Whenever I'm making Italian food, I try to find the most authentic way of making them. For this tiramisu, I'm using a traditional Italian method with no cream. However, the biscuits used for tiramisu, commonly known as Ladyfingers here in the US, I didn't buy enough of them, so I decided to do a layer of cake as the bottom layer. Because of this, I couldn't call this an truly authentic Italian tiramisu, but it's pretty close. For my bottom cake layer, I am making a basic chiffon cake, but with a touch of coffee infused within. This is a scaled down version of all the other cake videos I've made, so I'll spend a little bit less time explaining this process. I started by separating 2 eggs. Into the egg yolks, I am putting in 30 grams of oil, half a teaspoon of vanilla extract, 30 grams of whole milk, and a teaspoon of espresso powder to give the cake a coffee flavor to begin with. Then adding in 40 grams of flour and mixing those together until smooth and combined. Then I started beating the egg whites and gradually adding in 30 grams of sugar until the egg whites achieved stiff peaks. Carefully folding the whites and yolks together, and this cake batter is going into a buttered 9x9 cake pan and baked at 320 degrees for 30 minutes. Now let's get into the actual tiramisu. Start by extracting the yolks from 3 large eggs. You can do this by juggling the eggs back and forth between the shells, or do what I'm doing, which is cracking the egg into one hand and letting the whites drip between my fingers. Then measure out 120 grams or about half a cup of sugar. If you can find very fresh or pasteurized eggs, then you can skip this next step and directly mix the sugar and egg yolk together. But the eggs I'm using is pretty generic, so I am going to pasteurize them by setting up a double broiler. Fill a small saucepan with about an inch of water and place on medium-low heat. Place the bowl of yolk on top and make sure no water contacts the bottom of the bowl. The steam generated below will heat up the bowl very slowly until we kill off all of the bacteria in the yolk. Add in the sugar and continuously stir them together. If you need to take a break, then take the bowl off the heat. The mixing cannot stop or the egg yolks will cook and you'll be left with a very sweet scrambled eggs. Continue to mix until a thermometer reads 135 degrees Fahrenheit, which indicates that all bacteria are killed off. Take the bowl off the heat and let it cool. A way to speed up the cooling process is to set up an ice bath by submerging the bowl into another bowl filled with water and ice and stirring. Once the mixture is cool to the touch, which you can actually taste at this point because it is pasteurized, pour it into a larger bowl and add in 500 grams or 2 1/4 cups of mascarpone cheese, which is generally about 2 packages. Mascarpone is quite a bit pricey, but it is the main ingredient for tiramisu. There are ways to substitute it with cream cheese, but I'd recommend sticking to mascarpone. Mix the cheese and egg yolks together, which started out quite difficult, so I resorted to using a hand mixer. Keep mixing until a soft and creamy texture is achieved. If your mixture is still very hard and dry, you can add in splashes of milk until the mixture becomes creamy. During this time, my cake has also finished baking and cooled, so I can now assemble my tiramisu. Measure out half a cup of strong coffee that has been cooled. For this, I am using a batch of cold brew that I've prepared earlier. You can totally use regular coffee, but the stronger it is, the better. This is also where you would mix in some alcoholic beverages, but since I don't drink, I am skipping that. I'm lining the 9x9 cake pan that I used to bake the layer cake earlier with parchment paper. This is so that I can lift the entire tiramisu out of the pan once it's done. To assemble the tiramisu, I am first laying down the layer of cake and drizzling about a 1/4 cup of coffee throughout the top surface. Kind of like how I made my tres leches cake. Then spreading on top an even layer of the mascarpone cheese mixture, about a 1/4 inch thick. Smooth it out a bit, but it doesn't need to be perfect, because we are dipping the ladyfingers in the coffee for about a second each side, and then laying them on top of the mascarpone cheese. Repeat until the entire surface of cheese is covered with ladyfingers. Poke the ladyfingers into the cheese just a bit so that they sink in a bit. And I also recommend not dipping the ladyfingers in the coffee for too long or it'll become really soft and soggy. Top it with the rest of the mascarpone cheese for the top layer. making sure to fill all the crevices between and around the ladyfingers. Now put a bit more effort into smoothing this layer as it is the top presentation layer. For me, I wanted a perfect top, so I used an offset spatula to really smoothen out the top. Wrap the top with aluminum foil, being careful that nothing touches the top surface of the tiramisu, and we're going to put everything in the fridge overnight. This is quite crucial. The longer it stays in the fridge, the better it is. The next morning, using the parchment paper handles that I laid down before, I lifted the tiramisu out of the pan. Now all there is to do is to sprinkle a good layer of cocoa powder on top, trimming away the edges, and this tiramisu is finished. And that is it for tiramisu. It's so much easier than I thought. It's so easy and looks so good. I ended up giving away all of my tiramisu to my friends who are still in town. It's kind of nice to be able to share the food I make with other people. That's what I enjoy the most about. And that's pretty much it for this video. If you've enjoyed it, consider hitting the like button and subscribing. Let me know down in the comments what you want to be seen made next. I do have 2 more videos coming up that have been requested, so stay tuned for those. And until next time, I'll see you guys.